101 on the basics of zipline networks in Death Stranding. A couple of things up front. This is mostly for trophy completion. In order to make all the deliveries, you're going to need to get the platinum trophy. You're going to need to spend a lot of time grinding, and setting up an efficient zipline network can cut that time in half. I haven't gotten that trophy myself, but I have finished off the eastern region, and just by seeing how quickly I got that done once I set up my zip lines, it is apparent that the central region, which is much, much larger, there's going to be a lot of time saved there if I set up my zipline network first. So primarily, this is going to be for trophy hunters, 100% completionists, nut jobs like myself. But it's also just a good way to get around if you ever have to do any backtracking, especially through some rough terrain. Now, a couple of things up front. You're going to want to delay doing this. You're not going to really be set up to succeed as well as you can until later in the game, once you have acquired, without wishing to spoil, wanting to spoil as little as possible, you're going to want the all-terrain skeleton, the power gloves, and the ability to upgrade structures to level 2, which is going to require chemicals and special alloy materials, in this case, for ziplines. So I would wait until you have all of those things before you set out to start doing this. Another thing to keep in mind, just because this is something that is apparent in here, zip lines and structures in general are either yours or someone else's by their very nature. And the way, I'll move away from this one so you can get a better example on the map, it's not the most clear. Your structures are this shade of blue, other people's structures are this shade of green. And those colors are not as distinct as they could be, but it's the easiest way to tell. Also, other people's structures will say online, yours will just be the name, and if you see underneath the structure there, it tells you the bandwidth used. Other people's do not. So that is the easiest way to tell. And I bring that up because for most structures are single-use things. This post box, this bridge, in and of themselves, they work fine. What we're looking to do is create a self-sustaining zipline network that hits the entire map, all of the important parts of the map, and doesn't rely on other people's zip lines to complete that connection, because they won't always appear. And even if they do appear, sometimes they are in locations that are only useful to relay one important zip line to another, and if you don't have the full network, then they're not very useful. So zip lines are one of the few things that it's probably better designed to be entirely self-sufficient, which sort of is at odds with a lot of the themes of the game, but I'm not here to analyze that. Anyway, so what we are doing is just going around the eastern region, and I'm just basically going to be showing you placement. The all-terrain gear, the power gloves, are helpful for getting over some of the more difficult terrain, especially up in these mountainous areas here. Now, starting at Capital Knot City is where we are, right here. Right there. Our first step is going to be making a connection to the way station west of Capital Knot. That is the first major location in the game. And the way I like to do this is from the entrance, because you can't build inside the perimeter here. So from the entrance of the city, it's worth checking out, just as the crow flies, what your distance is. 1,042 meters. Now, zip lines, their base range is 300 meters. That is their maximum distance. But if you upgrade them to level 2, that range increases to 350. So you could make that jump in almost exactly 3 zip lines if you go completely straight as the crow flies, because you're starting at 0, goes up to 350, 700, and 1,050. So you're working in 350 meter increments, keeping in mind that you're going to have to upgrade in order to make that work. Now, it's often not so forgiving with the terrain when it comes to sight lines, and in this case, it is one of the few where it is almost a perfect line, and that's great. It is a very satisfying feeling when you can make that work, but it doesn't always work out that way, so be prepared to have to work around the landscape and the terrain. So as you can see from here, we've got 350 meters to the next line, right? And this is going to be basically a straight line from here to the way station. Oh, another thing to point out is bandwidth. If you're at this point in the game, you've learned by now that bandwidth is what limits your amount of structures you can build on a map. So if you see at the top of the screen there, we are using 10,500 bandwidth. Zip lines are 500 apiece, so that means we have 21 zip lines on the map at this point. You're going to not necessarily have all of that at once. You're definitely not going to have all of that at once, because you have to complete deliveries and increase your connection level with the different facilities in order to increase that bandwidth. So my recommendation is start with the larger cities that you have access to at the beginning and build your network out from there. So from Capital Knot to the way station and down to the distribution center. And then do deliveries, build them up, and once the bandwidth expands, then you can build more and build your network out. It's going to have to be a sort of one step here, one step there process, but eventually you will be able to hit all of the locations. So we've got 2 zip lines, the one at the foot of Capital Knot, and this one here in the middle of the field that it connects to. And the way I like to do that is I put a waypoint on the zip line I already have established, and then run as the crow flies toward my location until I hit that 350 meters. Drop the next one down, make sure we've got sight lines, and double check. Now, what you can do if you want to absolutely be sure is upgrade the locations as you finalize them. So for instance, the one over by Capital Knot, upgrade that once you place it, and then you'll know here. Or if materials are scarce, upgrading the one in the middle. So this one I'm on, which connects from Capital Knot to up on the hills there. That will be able to extend that 350-foot range in either direction. Now, keep an eye on that. That is something for the very end, because I had some extra bandwidth and felt like doing it. But that is where we're going, this one up on the hill here. Now, this is going to be the first major idea of sight lines, or the first major example, rather, because from the top of this hill, we get a pretty decent vantage point of the entire lower area. So this valley back here is where we are connecting from, and then this valley over here gives us the angle on the way station up ahead. Now, you could be tempted, as I was at first, to try to build up there, because this ridge runs down the whole middle of the region, and it's very tempting to want to just drop all along this ridge and then just shoot tributary points off as you go. Don't do it. You can't do it. I have tried. I've spent hours walking around this entire ridge trying to find a way up, and even parts that look like they should be climbable, there are invisible walls that will knock your ass down, and then the BB will cry and you'll bleed, and then the ghosts will show up and you'll waste a lot of time and get frustrated. Now, if there is a way up that someone has found, please tell me, please let me feel like an idiot, because I would love to have gotten up here and made this as efficient as I possibly could, but I couldn't. I tried. So save yourself some time. Just don't try to get up here, unless you know that you can, in which tell me and I'll feel dumb, but it'll be worth knowing. Anyway, so moving on to the fourth node in our network here. Now, when it comes to placing terminal zip points, that is, ones that you're intended to get off and on at, you want to give a little bit of consideration to the placement. Those two that I passed in the field and up on the ridge there, once you get to that point and drop the zip line, it doesn't really matter. They're just relays. They're to get you from one to the next. You never really have to get off, so the terrain that they're on is not a huge factor. But you want to make sure that you are, for instance, if you put this one up here where I'm standing, that is great. Height is always good, except that's where we're planning to get off, so it could dump you and you'd be falling off the rock as soon as you got off the zip line, and then your cargo could fall off or be damaged or any number of things. So for relay points, that's great, but for here, because the way station's right there, we want to try to stick to flat ground, preferably near a path if possible, if only because zip lining around everywhere can be a little disorienting, and this path just kind of gives you your eye something to follow and get your bearings on as you're getting to your destination. Now, it's not entirely necessary, like none of, all of these little details are obviously up to personal taste, but that is, I like to be able to, once I land, have that sort of reference point. And again, the truck and the generator right there, those would be nice if you could rely on them, but that Epcot dome looking thing at the top of the way station is pretty good. And then later, as in, we'll see in a second, the Bridges facilities have a pretty distinct shape as well that are good to navigate by. So 4 down. That green one there, that's someone else, we're ignoring that. Number 5. Now, this is just to get us across the canyon. We have a bit of a trek to make before we hit the next station. And so we are just looking for mules. They'll never really catch you. Like, as long as you're, if you hang out, they might catch up with you, but as long as you just keep moving, you don't really got to worry about them when you're zipping around. Now, we have to go from here all the way down to the distribution center is the next leg of the trip. And that we are just looking to cover distance. So we are looking for as efficient use as possible, 350 meters, 350 meters at a time. And in this case, we fortunately were able to hit a canyon wall and then this small island in the middle of the path at exact 350 meter increments. That was handy. So this one, fairly simple. Again, just drop a waypoint there, run out till about 350 meters, call it good. Upgrade as you go, and they are, I believe it's 480 special alloy, 240 chemicals, but they are when you go to claim materials, they are the largest increment in the top row. There'll be extra large kegs on your pack. And that is to upgrade a zipline from level 1 to level 2. So this canyon here, this sort of rock structure, this is one of the reasons you're going to want to use the all-terrain skeleton and the power gloves. That just makes it easier to climb these sorts of things. Let's get off for a second. This might drop me. Let's find out. So when climbing up terrain like this, the game is not great on its own at telling you what is and is not climbable. Sometimes that's invisible wall problems, but what I've found is if you use your Odderek, not quite sure how to pronounce this thing, and I've been playing this game for long enough that I really should be. Your radar system here. The red X's are untraversable terrain, and the yellow dots are difficult terrain. The blue dots, of which there aren't any here because we're on the side of a hill, would be normal, easy to navigate terrain. So up hills like this, what you're usually going to want to do is follow the path of yellow dots. The all-terrain skeleton and power gloves, once you turn on the booster, is going to help you get up that more stably, and it's going to not drain your endurance as much, so you won't have to stop and rest as often. That's how you get up onto places like this, and no, don't do it. Okay. And then just be thankful that you only have to get up there the one time to create the zip line, and then you don't got to deal with that anymore. That's why we're going to all this effort. Now, over here, this was actually the last location I found because I didn't have this prepper on my map at the time. He was the last one I acquired. The Ludens fan, and the reason I didn't have him, little side thing for you. The reason I didn't have him is because, unlike most of the others, there's no order. He doesn't have an order from one of the main stations in order to unlock him. You have to first actually get to his spot, and then you have to take an order from his terminal to find some... No. There's no order on his terminal. That's my mistake. He just has gear lying around. I believe I found it at the base of this hill down there. Maybe a little bit toward that generator. So you find just loot that he's had lying around, you bring it to him, and then he'll unlock. But it was convenient that his perch here had a perfect line of sight on that zip line I had set up previously on my way out. So that is a little side jaunt over to the Ludens fan to get him into the network. Moving on. Oh, also, it's worth pointing out, this is one continuous straight line from Capital Knot City to Port Knot at the end, with three side paths to hit other preppers along the way. The Ludens fan, the wind farm, and the musician, which we will come to in a bit. Alright, so moving on from the hill, we're going to just carry on again down here. This is a 300 meter jump just because the distance was sufficient that I didn't need to upgrade it. was small enough by the time I got here. And this will bypass you. Ghosts have, BTs have dragged me off of my my zip lines before, and also it is worth noting that the rain is continuing to degrade any cargo you have, so you're not in super danger, you're not in like great amounts of danger as long as you don't, linger too much. Just keep moving, at a decent pace and it'll be fine. So this is the bridges facility. This shape is what you're going to be looking for a lot of the time. This big dais platform, leading into the distribution center, and the large overhang on the top. That's good to look for when you're trying to set up networks, especially in the central region. There's one in particular that in the center of the map that kind of is how I find my bearings on just about anything. Like anywhere I am, I can always like look around for that one and know how to resituate myself. So that brings us to and I lost count. What are we at? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 so far out of the 21. Getting us more than halfway there. Now, coming up next are the ones that are going to take a little more of a trick to them. That is not mine. This one up here. This is important because going from the distribution center, we then have two directions we need to head in at once. And after a lot of experimentation, placing zip lines in a lot of different spots and then having to tear them down again because they didn't quite work for one reason or another, this hill right here, specifically on this very edge, for a reason that'll become clear in a second, is where I ended up having to place it. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be in this exact spot, although I believe the 350 meters just happened to be from where I had placed the distribution center. But it is important to be able to look straight up that way and to be able to still have a good angle on that canyon. So, to the wind farm, because that is by far the trickier of the two directions we need to go. So we need to make sure, and honestly, the way I did this was I got this spot here the way I liked it. I set up a zip line at the base in front of the wind farm, and then I did the one in the middle and finagled it around until both blue lines connected. When all else fails, that's a good way to make sure that you've got the sweet spot, as it were, because sometimes it is hard to plan from one end to the other, so sometimes it's easier to work from the outside in. I already lost track of the number of zip lines we can use at this point, but I'll go back and count later and hopefully remember to put some notations in keeping count. Now, it's always going to be raining here. This is always going to be a haunted forest. There's going to be BTs all around. And that is just a thing you got to deal with while you're setting this up, and then the knowledge that you don't have to deal with it anymore. Also, the trees are not blocking. I found that out after a lot of experimentation trying to go around the canyon. The trees do not block you. The trunks will block you. The leaves will not. So you can hit that wall down there up to the top of this ridge, making sure you have, you know, good sight lines, or like I said, do it the way I did, where you work, you know, you set up the one on the ridge there, you set up the one in front, and then just move this one around until the blue lines connect. And that'll send you down to, through all these trees, to the wind farm. And my great sadness is there was a spot down here that I so very much wanted to be able to put my zip line, but couldn't find a way to make the sight lines work. I wanted it... Oh, BTs. Not going to have to worry about them. I very much wanted to put it between these two trees, so every time I zipped down it would be like a field goal. I couldn't do that, but it would have been fun. It felt so good never having to deal with this forest again. And the trees will not, the branches will not knock your cargo off. I had a slight concern the first time I went through, so I did a test run, and they don't. You're completely safe. And a lot of these, it feels like you're gonna bang your legs on the rocks. Just the angle is somewhat disorienting. So, now that we've hit from Capital to the station to the distribution center to the wind farm, and we did a side stop off on the Ludensfan on the way. The final leg of the trip here. So again, this is just a 350 meter extension because we're still working on covering a lot of distance. Yeah, unless you see like particular sightline issues, the name of the game is just be efficient, cover distance. And over to the left is the musician, the last optional prepper, and then up to the right is going to be the final trek up to Port Knot. So let's hit the musician really quick. This is one of the things that, especially in the central region, you're going to have to get used to. And it's going to look a little unclean. It's not going to look as tidy as it could, and that annoys me, but I'll just, you have to deal. Is that some of the preppers, you don't get... you do not get your choice of spots. So you have to do this little... The best way I found to, get an angle and a location for a zip line is to go up here, and then when you get off, you have to do this like little stumble. Be sure to hold R2 and L2 and stabilize yourself to get down this hill. Because once you get down here, like I could put a zip line right here, but those canyon walls make it impossible to get a sight line on anywhere efficient. Like you could bounce from one and then over to that wall and two, but then you're using two zip lines where one would do you. And the fewer jumps, the better, because you've A, only got a limited amount of bandwidth, and B, if you're going to be making this trip over and over again with, cargo on your back to complete all the deliveries, then it's just the fewer transfers you have to make. It's just going to make that process feel a lot smoother. And honestly, a lot of the preppers only take one or two good deliveries before you've maxed them out anyway, so if you have to deal with that little hill like one or two times in the long run, I think it's worth it. Now, one more hurdle to get through on the way to Port Knot and completing the eastern region is this canyon. There's a lot here. There is rain, there is ghosts, there's a couple of branching paths. I spent a lot of time here trying to figure out what is climbable and what is not. And ultimately what I found was this ridge, not the furthest amount of distance, but it gets me around the corner because all of that rock structure there in the center just blocks everything. So getting something on this high ridge here to get around, and then something I stumbled on by accident. And honestly, if I'm telling the truth, I stumbled on this first and then found that ridge I was just on as a means of connecting the two after the fact. Again, working from the outside in. This is the archway over a tunnel that comes out of the canyon itself and into this plateau area. The tunnel is very distinct. You'll see it when we move on to the next side, but I somehow found myself on top of it and then realized the view was too good to pass up and had to drop a zip line up here while I was there. This is why you always want to carry, even if you're just doing like some exploratory climbing, carry a couple of PCC level 2s with you just in case you happen upon a spot like this and it's too good to pass up. Now, the last 3 zip lines on the way. Oh, and here's a good shot of the archway down over there behind Sam. Now, this is just a matter of finishing up the distance, right? So the archway we were on is right here. Is it? Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Here. Thank you. You look at the maps for long enough and they all start to look the same. So all we need to do at this point is cover the distance from here to Port Knot. And again, it is a matter of, let me head back up to the arch really quick just for demonstrative purposes. And I've been glossing this over as I've been going, but it was a technique I used when I was laying them out. Technique. It's just some simple math. I am on the ridge. We want to complete the final leg to Port Knot. The distance is about 800 meters. That is 3 jumps, any way you slice it. Could be done in 2 if you upgrade and do 350, because that, it's worth remembering, that is the distance to the distribution center and the actual entrance where you can drop a... There's the zip line I ended up using. This is where you can actually drop the thing, so you're not covering the entirety of that distance. But if you can get close, like in this case, 96 meters after 2 jumps at 700, you can get close. Well, terrain doesn't work because that only works if you go in a straight line. And the way this plateau ended up, the best thing I found to do was to go along the edge of the plateau down onto this lower step until I found somewhere that had a straight shot. And it ate up and I had to end up using a 3rd to cover the distance I lost in that corner I made, going from there to here. It's better on the map. Going from there to here. That corner ended up eating a bunch of that distance. And so from here, it's just a straight shot down 350-meter leg. Now, originally, I managed to get all of those done while I still had packages to deliver. Up to and including this zipline that I am about to land on. I went around, I delivered the rest of the packages, I raised and got, maxed out my chiral bandwidth for the eastern region, and then realized I had about 1,500 bandwidth that I was not using. It won't show it unless I'm on the ground. There we go. 1720 to be exact, but so what I did then was I had been running on fairly flat ground here, this last leg, but then what I did was I built an extra zip line. This is just a luxury. It's not a good use of distance at all, but it gets me right up to the runway and into Port Knot City. And that right there completes everything you need to do. But I still had 1,000 left over. So let's go all the way back the way we can. That concludes the important part of this. I'm pretty sure I haven't beaten the game yet. So I'm pretty sure that the last thing I'm going to show you here is unnecessary, but I can't confirm. But it just felt like a thing to do because I had the bandwidth to spare. This is not mine. That's brings up something else worth pointing out. So earlier when I was saying that the networks only really work when they're put together, and if you get some but not all of another player's zipline network in your game, it is not necessarily useful. Times like that, it can also be annoying. It can just be an extra thing you can connect to when you're trying to go from A to B, and it doesn't really hurt anything, but it's kind of a pain. It's I'm aiming for efficiency here. That's one of the satisfying things for me, and having little side branches off that take away from the efficient network I've set up and waste my time. They can irk. They can get under your skin, and so I just tend to delete those from mine. And again, that doesn't feel good because that goes against a lot of the themes and I think the strong points that this game has going for it in terms of cooperation and connectivity. But so it goes. I mean, nothing's perfect. Anyway, that does, however, conclude basically the eastern region. I'm currently working on a zipline network for the central region, which is a lot larger and a lot more complicated. Not going to that one. I haven't completed the bandwidth, but from what I understand, the maximum number of zip lines you can use is 82. That's the number I read somewhere. Not exactly remembering where I got that from, but I also can't prove whether or not it's accurate yet. And it's a process. I've only gotten about a quarter of it done at present. And so if anyone has thoughts or input or would like to collaborate on finding, an efficient way to map all of that out, please feel free to send me a message or get in touch. If this network here on the East region has been helpful, feel free to, it is, I don't own these, placements. Feel free to set this up on your own. I don't have any, possession over it. Yeah, feel free to reach out, like, subscribe. I don't, all of the usual appreciation things people do. And definitely if you have any interest on working together to map out Central, because that is going to be a monster, and I am making a lot of guesses and laying down a lot of points that end up having to be deleted and start over from scratch. So let's get it all up. Pretty sure, nope, that's mine. This is mine. Almost back to the little Easter egg. Oh, and spoilers, I guess. So if you don't want to, if you're sensitive about it, I guess here is your warning. I don't know how much you could consider this spoiler, but you know, just for erring on the side of caution. There, that's enough time for a warning. There is a third area in the game. In my current playthrough, I have just gotten there. It doesn't look complicated enough that it will need a map. I could be wrong. But from the little bit I've seen of the third area, it seems to be 2 locations, straight line from one to the other. So I don't think I'll be doing a video on that, just because it looks so incredibly basic that it doesn't seem to warrant one. Anyway, that is the end of the spoiler. I should go back and put a notation showing when that ends. Anyway, so the last 2 zip lines that I had an extra 1,000 bandwidth and really nothing to do with it because I had completed the network. So I thought, just in case, I would build over this way toward the incinerator, where we did something very important very early in the game that if you're watching this and that would still be a spoiler, your priorities seem a little odd. It's only 2 jumps. Definitely want to make use of as much of the distance as possible, because as you'll see, we don't quite make it. So you're going to want to do as close to the full 350 meters on each jump as you can. I didn't put a lot of time in this, so maybe you can get on the top there. I had gotten so tired of climbing and falling off things that I didn't really give it a shot. But hitting on this outcropping here gets us up and around the canyon and gets us line of sight all the way out to the, well, not all the way out to the incinerator, but close. And again, ghosts, BTs, rain, things you don't have to deal with once the zip line is in place. And it gets us, you can see, not quite, we could have gone a little bit farther, but then sight lines become an issue, and the BTs are going to grab me, so I'm not going to hang out. But I don't know if we need to go back out to the incinerator at any point in the end game. If we do, I haven't gotten that far, but I had it to spare and figured, why not make things easier for myself if that comes up, because having to carry bodies around has definitely been one of the more frustrating parts of this game for me. And that's all I have to say about the eastern region and setting up the zipline network. Thanks for watching. I hope this is helpful, and this is going to be up on Twitch and on YouTube, so feel free to message or comment or like or subscribe or any form of human communication you want to do through those. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, night. I'm leaving now. I'm trying to leave now. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm new at this. Alright, the button is not quite... Oh, thank God I can edit this out. There we go. Goodbye.